The roses smelled too sweet, almost artificial, like someone had sprayed perfume over dying petals to make them look alive. I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in white silk and pearls, my reflection smiling back at me, though my heart felt painfully still. Everyone called it the wedding of the year. The elite gathered in marble halls, chandeliers glittered like frozen stars, and the man I loved, or thought I loved, stood waiting for me at the altar. Ethan Vale, a man whose name carried the kind of charm that could melt anyone's doubt. When I first met him, he was everything my lonely heart wanted. Kind, attentive, effortlessly magnetic. He remembered small things. My favorite tea, the way I hummed when nervous, the scar on my wrist from falling off a horse as a child. Every detail, every word, he made me feel seen. But as I walked down that aisle, something inside me whispered, "You don't know him." The crowd gasped when I appeared. My father's wealth had always made headlines, and now his only daughter was marrying one of the city's most admired men. Cameras flashed, guests smiled. Ethan looked like perfection in his black suit, but his eyes, they were cold, calculating. Still, I smiled, because soft women are taught that love means endurance, that silence means grace. When he took my hand, his grip was firm, possessive. His lips brushed my ear and he whispered, "Smile for them, my love. This is your dream, isn't it?" My dream. He didn't know that dreams die quietly, like candles in the wind. We exchanged vows beneath an arch of lilies. His words were flawless, practiced, dripping with devotion. Mine trembled with sincerity I still foolishly believed in. When he kissed me, the applause was thunderous, but beneath that noise I heard a faint echo, the sound of something inside me cracking. That night at the reception, he played his part perfectly. He held me close during the dance, laughed with my friends, toasted with my father. But behind every smile was a shadow I couldn't name. It wasn't until the next morning, after the guests were gone and the champagne glasses lay scattered across marble floors, that the truth began to seep through. I woke up to the sound of voices outside the room. Ethan was on the phone, unaware that I could hear him. Everything went exactly as planned. Yes, the estate is now in my name. Don't worry, she won't suspect a thing. She's too sweet for that. My blood turned to ice. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I let the words settle like ash in my lungs. In that moment, I realized something brutal. He hadn't married me. He'd married my wealth, my father's empire, my last name. And the man I had called my soulmate had rehearsed every smile. When he came back into the room, I was sitting by the window pretending to watch the sunrise. He kissed my cheek gently, his mask still perfect. He said, "Good morning, Mrs. Vale." I looked up at him and smiled. A small, soft, practiced smile, the kind he expected. Inside, I whispered to myself, "You want my world, Ethan? Then you'll have it. Every inch of it, and I'll make sure it destroys you." That was the day my silence became sharper than any weapon. The perfect wedding was over. The performance had begun. The honeymoon felt like a movie directed by a stranger. Ethan had booked the most expensive villa overlooking the Amalfi Coast. Endless sea, white balconies, and wine that tasted like liquid sunlight. On the surface, it was perfect, but when you've seen the truth, even beauty feels like a mask. He played the role of the charming husband flawlessly. He held my hand at dinners, smiled at waiters, called me "my darling" in front of strangers. But behind closed doors, his eyes lost warmth. Every affectionate word turned mechanical, every kiss rehearsed, and yet I said nothing. That was my first rule of survival. Never let the deceiver know you've seen his mask. So I played the fool he believed I was. I smiled, I laughed, I watched. He thought he'd trapped a naive girl blinded by love, but he'd trapped himself in my silence. At night, when he thought I was asleep, I'd hear him on the phone. His tone would change, colder, sharper. "Yes, the transfer is done," he whispered once. "By the end of the month, her father's holdings will be under my control." A pause, then laughter. "I told you, she's harmless." Harmless. The word cut deeper than betrayal, because once I truly had been gentle. My father raised me to believe kindness could heal cruelty, that if you loved purely, you'd never be replaced. Ethan was proof how wrong that lesson was. But I didn't break. I observed. On the fourth night, while he was in the shower, I unlocked his briefcase. Inside were contracts, legal transfers, documents connecting him to my father's financial advisor, a man who had conveniently resigned right before the wedding. My name was printed across the top of every form, forged, perfect. He had planned everything. That night, I stood on the balcony, watching the waves crash against the cliffs. I remember whispering to the sea, "You think I'm weak. But softness isn't weakness. It's the silence before the storm." When we returned home, the mansion felt colder. Ethan started coming home late, always with an excuse. Business meetings, client dinners, charity events, but his suits smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. I didn't ask questions. I let the distance grow, because every inch he pulled away gave me space to plan. I began visiting my father's old lawyer under the pretense of managing estate documents. The man adored my father, loyal to the core. It took only one meeting to confirm what I already knew. Ethan had been trying to gain full control of the family assets using power of attorney documents forged with my signature. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just smiled, the way soft women do when their pain becomes sharper than glass. The lawyer asked me, "Do you want to press charges?" I said, "Not yet." Because revenge, when served early, is noisy. I wanted silence, the kind that whispers in a man's ear when he's already lost everything and doesn't know it yet. Weeks passed. Ethan's arrogance grew. He started flaunting his wealth, my wealth, hosting parties in the mansion, boasting about his business expansion. He didn't know that I had already frozen his accounts through the lawyer's quiet intervention. He didn't know that every document he signed was now being redirected to me. He thought he owned my world, but in truth, he was signing away his own. The night before his biggest business launch, I stood in front of the mirror again, the same way I had before our wedding, only this time the reflection wasn't trembling. Soft, elegant, silent, but no longer naive. He walked in holding a glass of whiskey, smirking, as he said, "You're lucky, darling. Tomorrow, everything changes for us." I looked at him and replied gently, "Yes, Ethan, everything will change." He smiled and kissed my forehead, unaware that his empire was about to crumble before sunrise. And when he left the room, I whispered into the silence, "Tomorrow you'll realize that the woman you married for money owns everything you ever wanted, including your downfall."
Morning arrived like a curtain being pulled open on a play that had already ended. Ethan was buzzing with excitement, his usual arrogance magnified by the illusion of victory. His business launch, funded entirely by what he believed to be our assets, was set for noon. He looked unstoppable. But empires built on deceit crumble faster than truth spoken in a whisper. He didn't notice how calm I was. He didn't notice that I didn't ask a single question about his plans. He didn't even notice when I handed him his coffee with a serene smile, the same one he thought belonged to a woman too gentle to understand betrayal. While he dressed, I watched him tie his expensive cufflinks, gifts bought with my father's inheritance. He looked at me through the mirror and smirked. "You'll be proud of me today," he said. "I already am," I replied softly. He turned, kissed my cheek, and left, utterly unaware that everything he believed was his would be ashes before nightfall. The moment the door shut, I moved with quiet precision. I opened my laptop, entered the secure link my lawyer had sent, and watched the numbers shift. The funds Ethan had illegally redirected were now frozen, and every investor he had lied to had been sent an anonymous report exposing his forged signatures and fabricated contracts. I thought I was fragile, but I'd learned something dangerous. A soft woman who learns to stay silent also learns to listen, and listening reveals everything. By afternoon, the first cracks appeared. My phone buzzed with notifications. Investors back out of Vail project. Legal complaint filed against Vail Enterprises. Authorities investigate fraud claims. I turned off the phone and waited. When he finally came home that evening, his perfection had dissolved. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale, and his voice no longer carried the confidence that once filled every room. "What happened?" I asked softly, though I already knew. He slammed his briefcase on the table. "Someone sabotaged me. The accounts, the investors, everything vanished. The press already has the story." I blinked slowly. "That's terrible." He stared at me, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Did your father's lawyer say anything? Maybe they froze the assets by mistake?" "Oh, I doubt it was a mistake," I said gently. He froze. The silence between us stretched, heavy, fragile, waiting to break. I stood, walked toward him, and spoke in a voice calm enough to terrify a man who had only known my kindness. "You see, Ethan, you married me for money, but the money you wanted has never been yours. Every document you forged, every signature you faked, I've seen them all." His face drained of color. You knew?" "I learned," I said. "You underestimated me, Ethan. You thought softness meant ignorance. You thought love made me blind, but love only made me patient." He stumbled backward, grasping for words. You can't. You wouldn't ruin me." I smiled. "I didn't have to. You ruined yourself. I just moved a mirror so you could finally see it." He sank into a chair, trembling. For the first time, I saw fear behind his pride, and yet I felt no joy, only a deep, quiet ache. Revenge isn't always sweet. Sometimes it's hollow, like the echo of a song that used to mean something. I turned to leave but paused at the door. "You said I was lucky to have you," I whispered. "But it's you who should have been lucky, because I was the only thing in your world that was real." And then I walked away. Not dramatically, not angrily, just gracefully, like a ghost leaving a story that no longer deserved her. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of glass breaking, maybe a whiskey glass, maybe the sound of his pride shattering. Either way, the silence that followed felt like closure. The news spread faster than morning light. By the next day, Ethan's face was everywhere. Headlines, financial blogs, whispers over coffee tables. "Businessman Ethan Vail under investigation for fraud." The man who once charmed a city now carried the weight of his own lies. I sat at the breakfast table, quietly reading the paper, the same calm smile resting on my lips. He hadn't come home the previous night. I imagined him running between lawyers, phone calls, fake reassurances, the frantic dance of a man watching his empire collapse. When he finally stumbled through the door, he looked nothing like the Ethan I had married. His suit was stained, his tie gone, his eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness. "You did this," he said, voice trembling with fury. I looked up slowly. "You sound tired, Ethan. Coffee?" "Don't play games with me," he snapped. "You don't think I know? The timing, the documents, you planned this." I folded the newspaper neatly and placed it aside. "I didn't plan anything," I said softly. "I just stopped pretending not to see what was always there." He laughed, sharp, broken. "You think you've won? You think this makes you strong? You'll go down with me. The accounts, the assets, everything was under your name, too." "Oh, I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "That's why I made sure all evidence of forgery points to you alone. My signatures were never mine, Ethan. Every single one was fake, and all the originals are safe in the lawyer's vault." His face twisted in disbelief. "You're lying." "I used to," I whispered, to myself. "Not anymore." He staggered back, gripping the edge of the counter. "You're destroying me." "No," I replied. "You destroyed yourself the moment you thought love was something you could buy." He left the house that afternoon, not with anger, but with defeat. I watched from the balcony as he got into his car, shoulders slumped, pride cracked open like glass. The sky was heavy with gray clouds. Fitting, I thought. Even heaven mourns for those who build their lives on greed. Over the next few days, his world disintegrated piece by piece. His company dissolved, investors withdrew, the authorities froze his accounts. And when his so-called friends realized he had nothing left to offer, they vanished like smoke. I received messages from socialites and acquaintances who had once envied our perfect marriage. Now they whispered pity. I didn't reply. Pity was for those who hadn't earned their pain. Ethan called me one night, his voice fractured by desperation. "Please, we can fix this. Just tell him it was a misunderstanding. I'll make it up to you, I swear." I stayed silent for a long moment, letting his words echo against the void he had created. Then I said softly, "Do you remember our vows, Ethan? You promised to protect me, to love me, to be honest." He exhaled sharply. "That was before—" I interrupted. "Before you showed me what you really wanted. You wanted my world. Now you have it. Empty, broken, and in your name. Congratulations." He tried to speak, but I hung up. That was the night I slept peacefully for the first time in months. A week later, I visited the office where it all began. The building that once carried Ethan's name now displayed a "for sale" sign. Dust coated the marble floors. The receptionist's desk was empty. Standing there, I felt no triumph. Only closure. Revenge wasn't about making him suffer anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of myself he had buried under his lies. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the wall, a framed photo from our wedding. We looked radiant, invincible. I traced a finger over the glass, then quietly whispered, "Rest in peace, illusion." I walked out into the fading sunlight, my heels echoing softly in the hollow hallway. Behind me, Ethan Vale's name slipped into silence. Just another ghost in a world built on greed.